It's my favorite part of the week. Look forward to hanging out with my coworkers, even though it's remotely. Dan Duva standing by on the Vegas Strip. Stormy Buonantony is in Summerlin and tackling the Midwest and patrolling everything out there is Mike McKenna with his family. I'm Darren Millard. This is the Knights Report presented by Ed Bernstein, and today we are going to hang out with Gage Quinney, a Chicago Wolf, and Vegas Golden Knight this year. Was called up and became the first Vegas-born member of the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll chat with him. Also discuss the resumption of play plan that has moved along and a signing by the Vegas Golden Knights with Nick Watt inking that 2-year extension, plus the storm surge, the game that we end up off every Knights Report with Stormy Buonantony posing random questions that stump us all and make us look like fools. But we're at that process, that stage where we quite enjoy being made fools, fun of. So let's bring in Gage Quinney. Gage, this is the Knights Report presented by Ed Bernstein, where we catch up with various members of the organization. Where are you? We know you're outside. You're enjoying this weather right now. But your process through the course of this pause has been what?
Just staying inside, staying safe, trying to keep my mind off it as much as possible, and really just doing whatever I can to pass time.
Normally, we kind of go around the horn a little bit and let everybody have their question and their time with the players that we bring on. But this one's going to be a little different. Dan, Mike, and I are going to step back. And Stormy Buonantony, like you, is Vegas-born. So I just want to set up and let you guys have a little Vegas-born catch-up here on the Knights Report. Stormy.
Okay. Well, Gage, I referenced this to you earlier, but just so thankful to have the Vegas ties all in here with you here and Mike McKenna, who of course spent a couple years with the Wranglers, to outnumber some other folks, whereas I was outnumbered last week dealing with Zach Whitecloud, Darren Millard, Shane Knighty, Gary Lawless, all those Manitoba guys. So it feels really good to have you on. Was curious for you, just as a Las Vegas native and having moved away, maybe what was something for you that growing up here you thought was so normal, and then you move somewhere else and it's kind of a culture shock. You realize, okay, maybe that wasn't so normal after all.
The biggest thing for me was everything's closed, like has hours and stuff. As in Vegas, it's 24/7. So all the restaurants are always open. And then when I moved away, there was nothing to eat ever after games, and like little things like that kind of really took me by surprise.
Yeah, that's something you never really think about. Everything, this is such a 24-hour town, and even when things close, they close relatively late. For me, it was that when I moved away, and then the fact of how many things are actually in casinos, like movie theaters, bowling alleys, and also at a time an ice rink. And I first learned how to ice skate at the Santa Fe Station, old ice rink, and I'm pretty sure you have some ties there too. What are your memories of the old Santa Fe Station rink?
I just remember the ice used to be like, it was like a swimming pool because they didn't really know how to like Zamboni it. So it was always really, really wet, and it always ruined your gear and stuff like that. And that's all I really remember of it. But
we had a few practices there with the Wranglers. I have that exact same memory. Really soupy ice. And yeah, once it froze, it was like 5 grit sandpaper because it never really got cut the proper way.
I think the parents just like going there just because it was in a casino. So during kids' practice, they just go gamble and wouldn't really know what happens on the ice.
Gage, what's the reaction from people, like when you tell them that, like, no, not only did I grow up in Vegas, but yeah, like when I first learned how to skate, I was skating at a casino?
I think it's better that I get that than a lot of the California parents and stuff would ask me if I was skating on sand and stuff like that. So I think the whole casino ice rink is better than asking me if I skated on sand growing up, but it's not bad.
What was it kind of like, though, from your perspective, growing up here in a hockey world, a hockey family, but not really having it be the way that it is now in the NHL, that Vegas is kind of this, it's become its own little hockey mecca, hockey town. It wasn't that before.
Yeah, when people ask you, like, what you played sport-wise growing up, and if I said hockey, people look at me like I had 2 heads when I was younger and look at my dad crazy and stuff. And then now it's a huge hockey hotbed. Now it seems like if you don't play hockey, people look at you weird.
How much of a sense of pride does that give you then, to be kind of the most well-known, first Nevada-born, first Vegas-born player to be on that stage in the NHL?
Yeah, it feels good, obviously, but without my parents pushing me to do all the little things and keep with it, it's a lot of it goes to them. But to really stay with it, and during a time where there was no hockey and see there be plenty of hockey now is awesome.
Speaking of that, I had a question just about your father, Ken, because obviously he was one of the more famous Las Vegas Thunder players. I know your memories of that time were pretty limited because you were younger, but why did you just text him instead of call him when you got the call up to the NHL? It was just a text message?
We're not two social people, so one text message avoids phone call and talking. So I think we both would have done that.
Do you have any memories of your dad playing hockey outside of the mascot?
I just remember like the Las Vegas Thunder, the lights used to scare me and stuff. And when I was younger, I used to cry when the lights and the intro would go on. So after that, I started avoiding that, I think my mom said.
Really?
Yeah. Other than that, I don't really remember much play, but I just remember the mascot and then the intro.
Well, I would kind of like to go into your first game, and all you guys can chime on here as well. Your first game in the NHL, of course, as we said, the first Vegas-born, first Nevada-born to suit up, and you got to do it in your hometown against the Florida Panthers. As you kind of reflect on that whirlwind of a day, like what do you really remember most, aside from not getting your nap in? I remember you telling us that.
Yeah, I just remember like excitement. Like it's a dream come true to play in the NHL, and yet alone to play and make your debut for your hometown team and everything. And for me, it was just remembering all the people that told me that like hockey will never work here and all that stuff. And for that to come true was like really big.
I'm curious leading into this, how you come from Vegas when you're really at the ground level of hockey being there. You know, your dad being there with the Thunder. There was still minor pro hockey, but it was such a tight-knit community. And, you know, for me being there, I know how small it was. You had the LVIC and then you had Santa Fe. And that was it. I mean, I even came out to the LVIC when it was a roller hockey arena before ice. So I'm curious who in Las Vegas, aside from your father, really had a strong impact on your career, whether it was coaches, mentors, anybody else in the community?
Yeah, I had a lot of coaches that really helped me, like Rob Plain. He coaches over in Austria. He's one over summer, like he would help me do like skill stuff, like other stuff that my dad wasn't up to par with, I guess you could say, and stuff like that. And then Pokey Reddick, actually growing up, was one of my youth coaches all the time. It felt like every other year. So just having them and their experience, as Pokey played high level, so did Rob. So it was nice to have them too also.
You know, Gage, when we hear you talk about some of the people who coached you when you were younger, we think about those not only coaches, but those older players. You've got one of them on the screen right now, Mike McKenna, having just wrapped up a long career. And, of course, a lot of that was in the American League. And so I think about as the AHL franchise comes to the Las Vegas Valley, a lot of the Golden Knights fans will be familiar with you and some of the other prospects like Cody Glass or Nick Hague, some of the other guys who've already had a taste of the NHL. But I wonder if you could talk about some of the veteran players who are maybe a little bit older than you, who have been in the American League, who have been influential to you, because the folks in Vegas are going to get to know some of those more veteran minor league guys in the near future.
Yeah, that's like guys like Patrick Brown, I'd say. He's won the AHL. He's played many games in the NHL, but for him, he's a leader. He works hard every day, and he's just definitely an older guy. He has no problem answering your questions, and he's a really great guy, and he's easy to talk to.
Yeah, he's still got another year on his contract to stay with the Golden Knights too, and so he's an integral part of it. Yeah, there's a lot of leadership in that room with those players.
Yeah.
In your first game, what do you remember about getting comfortable, and maybe your one memory, whether it's lining up against somebody or on a rush? What do you reflect on that game?
Yeah, definitely. It was basically all nerves, but I just remember the opening draw. The ref actually dropped the puck before I was set, and really didn't give me a chance to set. Yeah, if you watch it, he just threw it down.
I think it was on purpose. He knew the rookie was coming up.
He saw the pregame lap and was like,
"Yeah, it felt like that."
Guy.
Do you remember who you were facing off against?
Trocheck, actually. So that was pretty cool.
I was just curious, Gage, I'm sure that it hasn't sunk into you, what it means being the first Nevada-born player, but maybe how surreal is it in a sense that as someone who's still working to achieve his goals, you are this example and this inspiration to so many kids in this town?
Yeah, it means a lot. It just shows that you work hard and put anything you want to towards like whatever it is, that it can happen. The amount of times I was told no, and then for this to happen and still not done yet, but to keep working and stuff is what I really hope that kids can learn.
Is somebody giving us the wrap-up sign there?
Yeah.
That's it.
I don't know.
That's
the
enough.
horn. That's a new one.
Speaking of horns, and then and we'll let you get back to your training and your work at Regiment. A lot of road trips growing up. Families that maybe you carpooled with, or you jumped in on those trips to California and other places.
Yeah, a lot of families, and it was always the same teams growing up every year, so we're really comfortable. They're like second families to you.
Who were they?
It was like the Monos, the Whites, the Harrises, families like that who loved hockey just as much. They had no problem taking extra kids.
That's outstanding, and we give them our thanks as well for producing Nevada's first Nevada-born hockey player in the National Hockey with the Vegas Golden Knights. Appreciate your time and continued success staying in shape and staying occupied as we go through this pause. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, guys. You guys are staying safe and healthy.
We will.
Thanks.
Appreciate it, Gage.
Thank you,
Bye.
Gage.
Night's Report presented by Ed Bernstein, Millard, Duva, McKenna, and Bonatoni hanging with you on this day. There's a couple of big news items to get to. One is the resumption plan, and we'll touch on that in just a little bit. Trumped by the contract extension, Dan, signed by Nick Waugh, who was acquired at the end of last season and has settled in and earned that 2-year full NHL one-way contract.
And when we think about Nick Waugh and the preseason, the training camp that he had, his first with the Golden Knights after having come over from the Hurricanes, and remember, he was on the winning side of the Calder Cup. He beats those American Leaguers, the Chicago Wolves, the year before. So when we think about what Nick did in the preseason, we're thinking, boy, this guy could very well make the team. And I wonder in a different dimension, maybe he would have, if not for the contract situation, in that he could be sent down and called up and sent down and called up, to the extent that the Knights could bank some cap space while also utilizing him as a key player and also letting him play in the American League. I think that he would have been on the Golden Knights if that was not an option. And obviously this has been proven to be the case with this contract. And Nick has talked about it recently here in the last couple of days, chatting with Gary Lawless, that this is proving what he had sought out to do to get the contract. And so there's not going to be this yo-yo from the American League to the NHL. It's not going to be the, transaction, even if it's a paper transaction, or you get on an airplane. And, he was living in a hotel, both here in Las Vegas and in Chicago. He didn't really have a residence. So what he's done on the ice and also just bearing the brunt of that transaction chaos all season, it's paid off. And boy, I tell you, he's the kind of guy, despite his age, his talent, his maturity belies his age. And, he's played 28 games for the Golden Knights this year, has 5 goals.
Yeah.
I hope he gets to keep his frequent flyer miles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you make sure you plug those in and you send them to the travel coordinator of every team when you go to one. What really signifies this, though, is that there was a plan with Nick Waugh. He was picked up in that trade with a purpose. And as you alluded to, Dan, with the cap scenario and the contract going up and down, that's not easy. And he handled that so well this year. He's always smiling. It was water off his back. There's players who've been in his situation before. They get called up 2-3 times, sent back down, score a goal and get sent down the next day. That happened to him, and it never fazed him. Some players would be really frustrated by that, and they would think that the organization isn't treating them fairly. None of that happened with him. It showed his maturity. It showed his drive. He produced at both levels. And really, when I think of Nick Waugh, is how versatile he is, how well-rounded as a player, and that fits within the Golden Knights ethos, is that all the forwards need to be able to play everywhere possible. He kills penalties. And some of the best compliments he received were when Mark Stone went out of the lineup, he moves up. Max Pacioretty immediately says, it was effortless out there. We didn't even have to think about anything. He fit in perfectly. It's because he skates so well. Very, very heady, smart player.
Yeah.
I mean, he did have a little pedigree coming in with World Juniors things, but it really came through in that playoff series against the Chicago Wolves, showing what
Mark Stone's a big fan of
and
his,
he's
Mike.
proved it. Yeah, absolutely. And, as I was saying, the biggest compliments you can get are from your teammates. And those guys all see the value in him. And it just, through the lineup, I mean, if you want to play in the NHL, you have to be well-rounded and versatile. There's not many one-trick ponies in the NHL, and you better be unbelievable at it if you are. So he's really impressed, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg with his game. It continues to grow.
Well, and Mike, Pete DeBoer said almost exactly that there right before the pause, saying that he thinks that Nick Waugh has just scratched the surface. He was really impressed with everything that he was doing. And just to kind of expand on what both of you guys were saying, the thing that I like the most about Nick is that everything that the Golden Knights asked him to do, he's done it well, and he's done it with that good attitude. I think we all can attest to him being one of those always constant smiling faces in the dress room. And they ask him, center the fourth line, third line. This is a team with a lot of centers. Can you play somewhere else? Okay, actually, Mark Stone's out. So how about you go play on a line with William Karlsson and Max Pacioretty? So he really does fit in well in a lot of different ways. And I think that especially for like the value price-wise that the Golden Knights are getting him, it's a good mutual thing that's working out for both him and the team. And I'm excited for him.
Dan, you brought up the shuttling back and forth. It means $67,000 in the American Hockey League, $700,000 in the National Hockey League this year. He goes to a one-way deal, $750,000. What do you think his upside is now that he's a full-time National Hockey League player in a one-way contract when he's on the ice?
The thing that comes to mind first, Darren, is he's got the height, and I think that he's got room to get even bigger. And as Mike pointed out, a heady player, very smart. And when you can have your physical abilities grow into the frame that you already have, you start to think about some of the bigger guys on the Golden Knights, just like, Mark Stone, guys who are in their later 20s. Pacioretty's now 30. When you're younger, you might have the height, but have you really taken advantage of the frame? You have to grow into it and get in the weight room and those sorts of things. And then, he's played the wing. He's played center, be right-handed. So you have that versatility in the lineup. And so I'm not sure that he's going to be a top six forward on a regular basis on this team, but that's not so much a knock against Nick. It speaks to the high caliber of the talent that the Knights have up front. For this point in his career, in his early 20s, if Nick finds himself, whether it's in a third line role or a fourth line role, I don't think that he is going to put up any sort of a stink in terms of where he finds himself in the lineup. But because he's versatile and successful in so many different roles, they're just not plugging him in there because they can. They're plugging him in those spots because they know he can succeed in those various spots.
That's right.
And I think the special teams is part of that too.
Yeah, value throughout the lineup. And third line, absolutely, I think is the bare minimum of what you're looking at in terms of his capability. If he's going to make that next step to being a second line or first line centerman, there will need to be a bit more on the goal scoring side. That will need to come. But again, he can fill in at any spot right now. It's just a matter of him growing into his game, gaining that extra strength. And who knows? I mean, he could end up being a second line, maybe first line centerman if things continue to progress.
Yeah. And I'll also add to that, Mike, just a thought that when we did start to see him play with some of those top six forwards, you could see that, he was thinking just a little bit more, and that millisecond of indecision is what prevented him from truly clicking at that very high level. But you would expect that, with just a little bit more time, that sort of thing will come in a young player's game.
For management to see the fruition start to come for a player that they believed in, that they saw playing against their team in that Calder Cup final last year, even more confident in that decision now.
And he's blossoming with the Vegas Golden Knights, and the man that he was dealt for has already been moved on by the Carolina Hurricanes. So it's a win in more ways than one for what's left behind for the Vegas Golden Knights and Nick Watt. This is the Knights Report presented by Ed Bernstein, Darren Millard, Dan Duvas, Stormy Buonantony, and Mike McKenna. There's been some movement on the resumption plan over the last 10 days when we look at what is next for the National Hockey League, and we started this conversation that we had on neutral sites a couple of weeks ago. The National Hockey League appears to have moved off that and is now zeroing in a little bit more on 4 separate locations that will house the individual divisions: the Pacific, the Central, Metropolitan, and the Atlantic. So just some news here, Dan, as we set you up first. The goal here, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have a Central Division city hosting the Central Division. Just to note that the National Hockey League is going to look at different locations that aren't necessarily hot spots. So that's the first order of business, is the city or location that hosts these divisions doesn't necessarily, or won't be part of a hotspot. The other one is the goal, if they go this route, is to play all 82 regular season games and finish off the regular season. So that's a bit of news, Dan, that we hear.
Yeah, in terms of the last thing you mentioned, the regular season resumption, Gary Bettman in a recent interview pointed out, and it was hard to miss the starkness of his comment, there's no revenue coming in right now. And as much as the postseason will bring in television revenue, the NHL remains a ticket revenue league. It's not quite like the NFL or the NBA, where the huge majority of income is from television deals. Ticket sales remains a big part of this. And so you have a smaller pot if you're going to split up the postseason television money. And so you want to get as much as you can in terms of those regular season games. And then when we talk about these different locations, a few have been mentioned, and other reporters just since the initial report came out have pointed to, okay, well, they might be looking at 4 sites, but they're not going to just zero in on only 4 sites. There's going to be a growing list of maybe 6 or even 10 possibilities. So as those cities are evaluated, they'll see which ones are viable, how many they might need. And it's also worth noting here, Darren, I think that while this is what is being talked about right now, it's not in stone. This is simply one possibility that the NHL might pursue. Because remember, just a couple of weeks ago when we were hearing about, say, North Dakota or Manchester, New Hampshire, and that sounded like a real possibility at the time. And now what we're reading, and what Gary Bettman has said, and some other important folks, well, that was never really a serious thing that was put on the table. They realized that was not going to be truly a goal. So it's important to note that these are discussions. It's not necessarily something that is the likely scenario. It could be what happens, but it is not as though they are focusing on this and only this right now.
Yeah, and a lot of this really coming from the fact that they want to get regular season games in again. It's not just the thought of going straight to playoffs any longer. The talk is now, hey, we want to try play regular season, whatever the extent of that may be going into it. The players think that they need a 3-week training camp. That might be a little optimistic.
The league agrees with that too.
Okay, so on both sides of this, we're getting that they need the camp. They don't want to deal with injuries. They want to make sure the level of play is nice and high. So you lead up time, getting it done. What they're also talking about, though, is playing 3 games, possibly same day in an arena. So you're getting through these games rather quickly to try to get to playoffs in a time frame possible. But I just see this as an avenue, again, to get the sport going. And it seemed to all come from when all the heads of the different sports met with President Trump and talked about getting things in, and there's a way to do so. So it's exciting. It's giving at least that glimmer of, hey, we're getting closer to thinking what could work. Again, there's moving goalposts, but just having that glimmer of what could possibly happen and kind of that dangling carrot makes things exciting again. And you're feeling the juice that, hey, we might have hockey back and other sports in a relatively short time frame here.
Stormy?
Yeah, I think it certainly feels encouraging at this point after so many comments coming out, where a time where it felt like it would be more of an if than when hockey returned, that there is more of that optimism, and the Players Association, ownership, the league, all examining all of these options. And when the idea first got floated and we were discussing, neutral sites and that, first thing I did was I shot a note to our AT&T Sportsnet game producer, Tavis, to see his opinion. Because, we heard, as Dan said, New Hampshire, North Dakota as big possibilities. Right. And the league was being flooded with all these pitches from cities and arenas. And he told me right off the bat that he thought that the league would fully exhaust trying to host games from NHL arenas before expanding the idea, because those buildings already have all the league necessities and broadcast infrastructure in place. It's pretty much good to go. And so, from obviously a game playing and broadcasting standpoint, all those things are still TBD, but I just thought that was interesting that our game producer, as soon as that news came right out, was like, I don't know. I think they're going to exhaust all possibilities at NHL arenas first. And it seems like that's where the discussion is turning now.
And not just because they're National Hockey League facilities, but this is also the presumption that there may not be fans in the buildings at the time, but because of the facilities and the ease of stepping right back in for everybody, dressing rooms, being able to go that route. Just to put a bow on this, Gary Bettman said it's not a race to get back. This is about doing it right and making sure that fans and players are both healthy. And as far as cities that have been bandied about, Carolina has been one. Edmonton has been another. I talked to a league source who said that they would love a balance between Canada and the United States to be represented on this, but it's not essential. It's more about not going to a COVID hotspot. And you talk about the health of the players. COVID-19 is one aspect to make sure they're healthy from that. And Mike, to your point on training camps, they want to make sure that the 3 weeks looks like it's the minimum to make sure that the players are back and healthy. One player told me this week they need that first week just to get sore and beat up again, and then recover and feel good. And I think a lot of people have gone through that during this process. So that's the resumption of plan. But the good news is we went from a few weeks ago talking about going straight to the playoffs. And now the discussion is about finishing off the final 15% of the National Hockey League regular season. This is the Knights Report presented by Ed Bernstein. Duva, McKenna, Millard, let's get in order and line up, because it is time for the Storm Surge. Stormy Buonantony.
I know you guys really love just the weird situations that I put you guys in. But today we were thinking, the question is, if you could wake up tomorrow in any TV show, what TV show would you want to wake up in?
Duva, do you want to go first on this?
In any TV show, does it have to be like a drama, comedy, rather than a news program, I guess? Is that what you mean?
Yes. So like a scripted TV show.
Not Sports Center or something like that? Okay. The AT&T pregame show?
I really enjoy like dark shows, but I'm not trying to be in The Handmaid's Tale or like True Blood or something. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like, what show would you want to be in?
Yeah, I mean, like if I were to pop into The Simpsons, like would I have my own cartoon of me? That would be kind of neat. I think of a couple of shows that I just enjoy. Like The Sopranos comes to mind, and as long as my life were not in danger, The Sopranos
would fit in so cool. Well.
Yeah, and the other thing is my understanding is that there was no ad-libbing in that script. You had to write, you had to deliver your lines just as David Chase had them written. So that could be hard for me. I might need to be on more of an ad-lib show, like say Curb Your Enthusiasm or Seinfeld. I think that my personality would lend itself better to that. But very interesting question. I'd have to think more about that, but that's what comes to mind for me, Stormy.
McKenna, Mike, I'm looking at you. McKenna, I'm going Tiger King with that mustache.
Well, it's close enough. I'm glad you're so concerned about my appearance yet again with the mustache. I tell you what, man, if I was digging in history here, MacGyver, the original series, and if it's a current series, boy, that's really hard for me. I don't watch a lot of current things, but there was a show on AMC called Hell on Wheels. A couple of years ago, it wrapped up, and it was basically about the American expansion westward and the railway doing it, and it involved Native American relations, everything. I thought it was fascinating, and I've always been kind of really intrigued by that period of America and really coming from the Louisiana Purchase, which started with Lewis and Clark's Adventure West and all that. So I'd pick Hell on Wheels just for the historical reference points and also because it was a great show.
I know how much you love saying "hit the gas," so I'm surprised you didn't
That's
just want
it.
to be in those local commercials. Darren, what about you?
I'm with Dan. Curb Your Enthusiasm would be great, just because there's freedom to roam and not stick to a plan. Maybe less memorization. I'll go Friends, just from the camaraderie and hanging out with your buddies and everybody being close. Yeah, yeah. I know it's a little bit before your time, Dubes and Stormy, but
I love it.
I think I'll go Friends and hang out. Maybe be the third roommate with Chandler and the guys.
All right.
I'm going even.
I did not like that show.
Really? I loved that show.
We had a lot of players would watch it.
How about Cheers, where everybody knows your name?
There's a great
that's
pick.
That's
Outstanding.
Probably a good one.
Norm,
Boston
just sit at
Town.
the bar.
Yeah. I like Cheers. That's a good idea.
That's a great one.
I want to be in the Golden Girls.
Oh, the Golden Girls.
Wow.
Yes. So I'm going like way before what Darren was saying. I was like, I want to be in the Golden Girls. I just want to be friends with Betty White.
Yeah.
Elf wouldn't be a bad pick.
Norman, you got to wait about 60 years before you're eligible. You know that.
Just for the St. Olaf
Makeup
stories,
is a beautiful
right,
thing. What did you say?
I said the St. Olaf stories from Rose Nyland, Betty White's character in the show. Yeah, I remember watching that show when I was a little kid.
Yeah, it is.
She's the best. She's the best. I used to watch it with my grandpa on the couch, and I just really felt like I would fit in with those gals.
Somebody asked me, I think it was someone, I think it was Aaron from our production entertainment crew. The trivia question going around the office was, can you name all 4 Golden Girls? And it took me a while, but I think I eventually got all 4.
Can you do it now?
Go for it. Yeah, can you do it now?
Well, I got Rose Nyland. B. Arthur's character was Dorothy Spornak.
What a name.
The mom, the mom is Petrillo, Mrs. Petrillo. What's her first name? Jeez.
Sophia.
We'll give it to you.
Sophia, right? Sophia, and
if you can remember Petrillo, you can have it.
Right. Well, it's an Italian thing, right?
Sure.
And then Rue McClanahan's character was oh boy. You put me on the spot here. I'm sure if I think about it long enough, I could get it.
Was there Blanche?
Blanche Devereaux. That's right.
This is impressive. I'm really impressed.
Wow.
What a show.
Good
Get
teamwork.
me right on the show next week, okay?
I'm told, I heard this somewhere, that there's a Golden Girls cruise out there. So maybe when we're all back, we can. Yeah, I know Stormy. It's staggering, but
once we can
that's
go
a great
on
question.
cruises again.
let's do it, and send us your TV show that you would, if you could be transported into tomorrow. Send it to that on social media. A lot covered today. Gage in the backyard. Boy, does he look comfortable in his own skin. What an awesome conversation with Nevada's first born Vegas Golden Knight. And then we get into the resumption plan, Nick Waugh, and now what you would do to transport yourself into a show. Thanks to Stormy Bonatoni, Dan Duva, Mike McKenna, and Gage Quinn. We'll chat with you again on the Knights Report, presented by Ed Bernstein.